That's right. Okay, so welcome all. We're going to talk about time. I'll shut this, and we're going to start with just some ancient ideas of time and how, if you're an ancient person, you don't have much of an understanding of science. You know, your experience of the world is purely qualitative. It's just based on quality. How do you perceive time? So I've got these words here: cyclic. Okay, that time is cyclic. There's lots of repetition. It's seasonal, lots of patterns of being. Okay, so let's provide some easy examples of that. Okay, so just in terms of day and night. Then there's day, then there's night. The sun comes up, the sun goes down. The sun comes up, the sun goes down. So you've got day and night, patterns of the day. Then you've got patterns throughout the year, don't you? You can have maybe 4 seasons where you have summer, it's hot, there's long days, okay? And during summer you have the trees, they've got fruit all over them and your crops are ready to harvest. So we have that season for harvesting, and then it gets cold and winter sets in and there might be snow, so it might be a time where you stay inside and you light a fire. There's that kind of season. And so not only are there sort of seasons through the year, but you also notice seasons in your life, like you're a child and then you see other people around you, perhaps your relatives getting married and having families, all right? And then you yourself become an adult and you get married and have a family. So there's that pattern of being playing out. You might be a child and then you become a father and then you become a grandfather. There's the pattern of being born and dying. Okay, there's all of these patterns around us, these patterns, these cycles of being. Does anyone know what this is? An image of it's sort of been cropped a bit, but it's the Mayan Calendar. Has anyone seen the film 2012? Yeah? Has anyone heard about the, we wouldn't call it a conspiracy, but the sort of the theory that the world was going to end on the 21st of December 2012? You guys heard that? Yeah, you guys were alive then. Who remembers it? Yeah, you were paying attention.
No one put up Christmas lights.
Oh, really? You put
in
up Christmas
Montebello.
lights?
No one did because they thought the world was going to end.
Is that right?
So there wasn't as many Christmas lights.
Yeah.
Some people still did.
I cried a lot.
You cried on the 21st because it didn't end, or?
No, because I thought it was, and I was like, because we were in Melbourne with my grandma, and I was losing my marbles. I was only like year 2.
Really? So. I am shocked. What anyone else?
No, I didn't care.
I don't remember it.
I don't remember
it either.
No recollection.
I was like, I haven't been around as long enough to give a shit.
You weren't as interested in.
I wasn't. I was like, you know, if you think this, you're a bit stupid. Like, who cares?
In year 2.
Yeah.
I was in Vietnam, and I looked at the calendar. It was the 22nd. I was like, oh, cool. Yeah. So we survived. But anyway, the reason there was a bit of hype about it is because the Mayan calendar is cyclic, right? And it goes in these cycles of thousands of years, and every 1,000 years or so there's an apocalypse where the world ends and then it's reborn. There's that repetition. They've got a wheel of time and they get to this stage and yeah, the world's destroyed and re-emerges and starts again. That was their conception. Okay. Now, Ecclesiastes, does anyone know what that is? It's a book in the Bible. It's actually my favourite book from the Bible. So I'm going to read you a little bit because I think it's very fitting. It paints a very clear picture of how these people used to think about time. And this book, Ecclesiastes, is often referred to as the philosopher's book, okay, in the Bible, because it is very philosophical. It's even, you might say, even a bit nihilistic. Okay, it's a bit sort of, there's no meaning. We've just got to enjoy our time under the sun. Okay, so here's what it says. I'm not only going to read it. Vanity of vanities, says the philosopher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity, all is meaningless. What do people gain from all their toil, at which they toil under the sun? A generation comes and a generation goes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down, and hurries to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Round and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All rivers run to the sea, but the sea is never full. To the place where the rivers flow, there they continue to flow. All things are wearisome. More than one can express. The eye is never satisfied with seeing, the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be. And what has been done is what will be done. For there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, look at this, it is new? No, it has already been in the ages before us. The people of long ago are not remembered, nor will there be any remembrance of people yet to come by those who come after them. Alright, so it paints a really good picture. The wind blows around, the sun comes up and down, the rivers run to the sea. There's nothing new, it's tiresome, it's wearisome, it just repeats itself. Anyone have any thoughts, comments? Okay, so let's look at some modern theories of time and how we understand it. So the static theory of time tends to be what we use in science and how we perceive the world in terms of science. And what it says is that time is a dimension like space. So if we're going to paint a diagram that illustrates it, okay? This is a diagram that illustrates both space and time throughout the history of the universe. So here we have the Big Bang, cosmic background radiation, and as time progresses, you have atoms forming, all right, and stars forming, and then the hydrogen smashing together to make the higher order elements, okay? Over here, stars, planets. So we have time on this axis, and then in all of those other positions, we have space, all right? So you can think of, if you were to capture this moment and all of it spatially, and then I'm going to stand over here, and then we've captured that moment, okay? Those are the different positions of time that we can take. Time is a dimension. So let's think about space, right? We're aware of three spaces, three spatial dimensions. You can go up and down, forward and back, and left and right. Okay, that's the three-dimensional space. And we also have this one temporal dimension. So I've tried to illustrate it here. Well, I found this picture trying to illustrate it. That says, you know, if we capture the three-dimensional world at that time, okay, and then there's another time period before that, and there's more time periods after that, and our world, our universe, is composed of these packets of time, okay? So let's think, before I bring up the next slide, how is space, if we think of space and three dimensions, how is it similar to time? Who would like to offer some ideas, if anyone? How is space similar to time? Why would we suppose that time, like space, is a dimension? Anyone else? This is really hard, by the way. Time is really hard to think about. Anyone else? How are they like even remotely similar?
Because without one, it's hard to imagine the other.
Absolutely, yeah. How can something exist in space if there's no sort of time? And you can't, if you have a time for something to happen, there has to be a location where it occurs, doesn't it? So they're sort of inseparable. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
They're both kind of like endless. Like you can't really imagine the end of space.
Yeah.
You can't really imagine the end of time.
Yeah, what it would be like to live without time and what it would be like to live without space. Yeah, really good. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to bring up a bit of a table here, and I'm going to talk about them, and you're going to be like, it's so obvious. Okay, when I bring it up, it's so obvious. It's really hard to compare them, but when I bring up this table here, you're going to be like, it's so obvious the links between them. Okay, so firstly, you guys have alluded to this. When we talk about place, we can have a place in space. All right, a place in space could be Mount Gambier. A place in time could be today, the 23rd of March, 2022. All right, and notice how when we combine those two things, we have a location in what we call space-time. It's located in space and in time. We can have intervals of space or a length of space. All right, the interval, the distance, the space between Adelaide and Mount Gambier. Okay, they can exist at the same time, despite existing places apart, all right, distance apart. And then we can think about intervals of time, okay? King Henry VIII, the notorious six-wife king who started the Anglican Church, and Queen Elizabeth, our current queen, okay, 500 years apart or so. Different time, but occupying the same space. Okay, so let's compare these two. Adelaide and Mount Gambier existing at the same time in different spaces. King Henry VIII and Queen Elizabeth existing in the same space, but at different times. Okay, so we can see a relationship there. We can also talk about, there's a distance between Adelaide and Mount Gambier, 500 k's. There's a time period between King Henry VIII and Queen Elizabeth. That's an easy way to understand it. When we talk about the present, what does it mean to be present? Okay, well, it insinuates both a physical space, here, and a time period, now. Okay, so when we describe the present, we describe it both in terms of space and time. We can divide spaces. Okay, space is divisible into kilometers and meters and centimeters and millimeters, and we can divide time. We can think of time being divided into segments, hours, minutes, seconds. Okay, this word extension has boundaries, like existing from one point to another. So for something to occupy space, for my body to occupy space, it exists from here to here. That's its extension in space. For me to exist in time, okay, or for you guys born in 2005, okay, 2005 through to the end of your life. You have an extension through temporal space, through time. And then we have boundaries as well, okay, so physical thing has its boundaries. Again, my body, boundaries here, they occupy physical space, and temporal boundaries. It starts at some point in time, and there will be a point in time where it no longer exists. It has very clear temporal boundaries and spatial boundaries. Okay, so we can see a lot of similarities. And also, everything we experience is a combination of both space and time. Right? Everything we experience. We can't seem to experience one without the other. Okay? So we've got good reason to believe that time is a dimension. Now, quite clearly, an object can be in one place at two times. Okay? So that's written philosophically. But let's understand what that means. Two different times. I can be here on the 23rd of March, 2022. Right, in this location, this place, okay, one place at time one, and I can be here at this time last week. What would that make it? The 15th, the 16th of March. Okay, I was here as well. One place, two times, two different times. All right, let's write that. I think to help us understand it. I can be PRC IT on 16th of March, 2022, and I can be in the PRC IT on the 23rd of March, 2022. So I can occupy the same space, okay, at different times. Okay, the next question says, can an object be in two spaces at one time? What do we reckon? Can an object be in two spaces at one time?
It depends what you define as a place, because like it could be on the border between South Australia and Victoria.
Spot on. Have a look at this.
Oh.
So we've got a bus there parked on the border of South Australia and Victoria. Okay, so you might say, oh, this, like you're just using a very loose definition of an object. Okay. That the object really, you can make arguments about composites not existing and so on. Let's treat it as one object, okay? If this is one object, it exists both in South Australia and Victoria. It's in two places at one time, okay? And we can make the same argument about me in PRC IT and PRC 5. I'm in both spaces at the same time, all right? So let's do that. We have a bus in Victoria and SA on the 16th of March, and on today's the 23rd. Yeah. You think that's bad?
What month is that?
March. Okay. So existing in both at the same time. So the answer seems yes, it can. All right. But here's a key distinction as well: is that for the bus to exist in both the South Australian border and the Victorian border, okay, now listen carefully to this part, it has to exist over that interval as well. Okay, so let's compare that to me in PRC-IT and me in PRC-IT again. Okay, for me to be in one place at 2 times, I have to continue to exist over this time period. I exist over this time period, so therefore I can exist in one place at 2 times. For me to exist in 2 places at one time, I have to exist over this interval. Over this interval between Victoria and SA, I have extension over both at this one point in time. Okay, so that is all the background to this argument. This is going to be very hard. Okay? An object can move backwards and forwards in space. Okay, I can move forwards, I can move backwards in space very clearly. Can an object move backwards and forwards in time? That's a question. Okay. And you might say, oh, it depends if you can do time travel or not. Okay, it depends if you can travel through time. It doesn't even require that. Okay, the answer is unequivocally, means without a doubt, unambiguously, yes. All right, and let's see if we can understand. Okay, let's look at what it means to travel through space. All right, an object is at place 1 at time 1. Okay, I'm at PRC-IT at time 1. And then I'm going to be at place 1 at time 2. Okay, so that's me traveling through space. All right, or it could be at place 2 at time 2. All right, but let's think about me. Okay, I'm in PRC-IT for our lesson, then I go away, go have a holiday, and then come back for our next lesson. All right, so I've existed in space. I've travelled through space at different times, and I've finished up where I started. Okay, that's what it means to travel through space. So that's a pretty clear definition of what it means to travel through space. Does anyone disagree with that, or everyone understand that? So let's really emphasise that. It exists at place 1 at time 1, so PRC-IT on the 16th of March, and then in PRC-IT on the 23rd of March. And then it maintains its existence from that period of time. I've continued to exist, I haven't stopped existing from the 16th of March to the 23rd of March, okay? Despite being in different places. I've occupied lots of different places in space. Okay, so then, that's what it means to travel through space. So then if we want to know what it means to travel through time, all we need to do is swap the word time with space. Okay, so let's do that. That's what I've done for you guys. All I have done here is swapped time with space. All right, you can check. Place 1, time 1. Time 1, place 1. Place 1, time 1. Time 2, place 2. Okay, and then here, rather than we're talking about time, we're talking about place. Okay, so again, there's a couple of things we can consider here. I think let's think about the bus. Okay, so the bus exists at place 1 at time 1 and at place 2 at time 1. Okay, so place 1 time 1, place 2 time 1. All right, that's what that statement is. It maintains its existence from place 1 to place 2. It exists over the interval between Victoria and SA, despite existing in different times. It exists on the 24th and the 25th and the 26th. All right. This bus matches this exactly. All right, so we certainly don't perceive it like that. We certainly don't see a bus, moving backwards and forwards in time. Has anyone seen Tenet? No? Okay.
Seen the end.
Seen the ending. The ending's pretty epic, pretty cinematically beautiful. So we certainly don't perceive it, and so it's very hard for us to imagine. But logically, when we define traveling through space like this is what traveling through time is. And everything does this. Everything we're surrounded by travels through time. Amazing. Okay, so that's just describing it there. All right, so that's the static theory of time. And what it says, we're going to talk about Immanuel Kant when we're doing epistemology in term 3. And he has this idea of what it is when we see the world. We don't see the world, he says. We don't see the world. We see the world through a lens, okay? And the way we understand the world is necessarily in space and time, okay? That they're not necessarily real features of reality, but rather they're imposed by us to help us understand the world. They're the glasses that we look at it through. And so static theory of time says time does not pass or flow. All right, we tend, that's how we experience it. Time just sort of flows past. But it says time doesn't flow or pass. That's just how we perceive it. And we can move through time just like how we can move through space. That's what this definition shows us. Yes, you can definitely move through time. That's what it means to travel through time. Seems so contrary to our experience. Okay, we have both special relativity and general relativity. Both demonstrate that time is relative. Okay. And what that means is that time depends on your place in space. All right, so basically, mass bends the space-time continuum. Okay, and so we have this web, this is space-time, all right? And where there's lots of matter, the more matter there is, the more it's going to bend space-time. Okay? So, and it's also the faster that you travel, the slower you're going to age as well. So this is another incredible film. I watched this last night. That's how excited I was about talking about this. So, who has seen Interstellar?
I've seen bits and pieces.
Guys, you've got to watch this whole movie.
I've seen it.
We should just watch movies for the rest of the
Yep.
course. It's a really, really good film. Yeah, really, really good film. And there's this one scene where they really demonstrate time dilation in this film. So there's no time travel happening, but people are aging at different rates because of the amount of gravity they experience. Okay? So what that means, if you were to go and live on Jupiter, okay, if you could live on Jupiter, you would age slower than someone here on Earth because there's more gravity there. All right, so what that means is you might have 1 year on Jupiter. I'm just making these figures up, okay, because I'm not exactly sure of them, but just to demonstrate the difference that you experience. If you are living for 1 year on Jupiter, here on Earth, for your siblings, would be 10 years. Okay? So what that means is if you were to live a year on Jupiter and come back, your siblings would have aged 10 years, you've only aged 1 year, they're older than you are. All right? Because you experience time differently depending on the amount of gravity you're exposed to and how fast you're traveling. So that's pretty fascinating about time. Now, static theory of time says this: events are just ordered by what comes first and what comes after. There's no tense, there's no present tense, there's no now. Okay, it's just at this date. All right. So if we're going to talk about James eating a burrito, we're not going to say James is going to eat a burrito, or James ate a burrito, or James will eat a burrito. They're both, see how they've all got tense on them. We're going to say James eats a burrito at this period of time, this place in time. Remember, time is a dimension, it's an interval. We can put a nail in and say that's where it occurred. And so this statement is eternally true. Okay, whereas when we get to the other theory of time, dynamic theory of time, Jensen, can you read that for me?
Consider the metaphor of a moving spotlight that slides along the temporal dimension, brightly illuminating just one moment of time, the present. While the future is a foggy region of potential and the past is a shadowy realm of what has been.
So dynamic theory of time can be described as sort of a moving spotlight. That time just sort of flows like this. It's a moving spotlight, and the present is what is illuminated. And how they describe the past, I like this kind of language. foggy past, the shadowy realm of what has been, okay? It's already happened, it's in the past. And the future, a foggy region of potential. Now, under this has some interesting properties when we consider tense. Firstly, they still say time is a dimension, but it's not one that you can move through, okay? It's something that is substantially different, all right? Whereas with the static theory of time, it's saying time is something that you can move through. It's just a dimension like space. This is not something different. It's like flowing in a river, and it's a mind-independent phenomenon, all right? And this is what we get from tense when we talk about the dynamic theory of time. Events are tense. And this is how we use language, isn't it? We use language as if time is real. James was eating a burrito. Past statement. James is eating a burrito. All right, present statement. James will eat a burrito. Future statement. And notice how the truth of these statements depend on when they're made. All right, so only one of these is true. All right, or it could be maybe you like burritos and you've eaten them before, you've eaten one now and you're going to eat one in the future. Okay, but the point of it is to say, James is only going to eat one burrito in his life. Okay, let's paint that picture. Either he was eating it, he is eating it now, or he will eat it. There has to be one of those. All right, and the truth of it depends on its location and time. Okay. So, lastly, it's probably useful to talk a little bit about time travel. There's some great films that show different parts of time travel. Who's heard of the grandfather paradox? Yeah, can you tell me what it is?
It's like if you travel back in time and kill your grandfather, that means that if your grandfather's dead, then you can't exist, so your grandfather's alive. But if your grandfather's alive, then you can travel back and kill your grandfather.
Yes,
if your grandfather's
absolutely
dead,
right.
then you can't kill your grandfather. Because you don't exist.
Absolutely right. Okay, so if you were to travel back in time and kill your grandfather, okay, before he fathered your father, all right, let's say that, before he was a father, then your father doesn't exist because your grandfather's dead. And so if your father doesn't exist, then you don't exist. And if you don't exist, then you can't travel back in time to kill your grandfather. So this sort of creates this paradox, doesn't it? And so it's for that reason some people say, well, you can't time travel, it's impossible. Although there are some different solutions that are offered, and I think you just described one then, didn't you? You described it as what it creates is a, you could say it creates two worlds. How can we illustrate this? Okay, so let's say grandfather, and we'll put a beard on him. Father, and we'll put glasses on him. And you've got a sword to kill your grandfather. Okay, so if you go back in time to kill your grandfather, all right, what does that mean? It means your grandfather doesn't exist, so he's dead. And if he's dead, he can't father your father, so your father doesn't exist. And so what does that mean about you? It means you don't exist. So what's the solution? So if you don't exist though, if you don't exist, then who's travelled back in time to kill your grandfather? And so one solution is to say, well, what this does is it creates two loops, okay? Because then if no one travels back in time to